Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Pi Revolution. So this series will focus on PyQt4, the GUI library for Python. So GUI basically stands for Graphical User Interface, which basically means that instead of your users seeing a bunch of codes on a terminal, they'll see all these pretty buttons just as you see here, tabs, buttons, and whatnot. Well, if you have a non-coding user, he'll basically act like this. I just like adding random jokes all over my notebook. And yeah, you can find this notebook at the bottom of the description. So before moving on, let's start with a really basic GUI. So over here we import sys. The thing about Python GUIs is that it needs to interact with your operating system. So sys is there. And well, over here we're not using sys for exiting, but if you want to clearly exit out of the system, then you basically have to add something called sys.exit xec underscore this. This is a basic convention. The reason I'm not using this is because we are using uh, IPython terminal, so that code doesn't work for IPython terminals too well, so I'll leave that out. Anyways, back to PyQt4. So from PyQt4 we start out with a really basic Qt GUI. So this is how it works. You define a function, so over here main, and for PyQt4 the PyQt4 GUI or widget needs to app on an application. So we have qtgui.app and sys.arg. Sys.arg basically is taking the command you have entered on your terminal. After that, you create a Q widget called W. So you make the widget and then you resize it, move it. You can set the title, and show is basically to show your widget. And after you're done, app.exit will clearly exit out of the GUI. The thing about GUIs is that they run in a loop. So if you try to exit it manually, you might um, encounter a really weird error message. So in order to avoid that, you have this app.exit to help you out. And this if name equals to main basically is telling that you're setting up the environment, which means that your Python code has just been called. So now that you know a bit about this, let me just run the code. So here's your code, my first Python GUI. Woo! That sounds like fun. So where did that go? So basically you have a very empty widget. It doesn't have anything at all. You have your title, your favorite Python GUI. The size is 400 by 200 and it was moved to somewhere here on the screen based on what you set on move. Okay, let's move on to our next code. Now, this is not really how you would make a GUI, not with one function. Usually when you're making a GUI, you create it in a very sophisticated class because you want to make something more advanced. So over here, we created a class called PrettyWidget. So, well, I'm not very creative with names, so we'll just go with PrettyWidgets for now. And what our PrettyWidget does is it inherits the qtgui.qwidget. So basically, it's basically acting just like the qwidget class, only we add other features. After that, we have our init constructor for classes, and we use super so that it inherits the init of the pretty GUI. So we're just basically saying that it takes in the initialization of Qt widget and we'll add more things onwards, which will be on our self.initui or user interface. So our user interface, we basically define everything just we have done above. So over here we had w equals to qwidget. Only over here our qwidget is the class itself, and so we do self.set geometry, self.set window title, self.show, and everything. Now over here we have the main function. The main function basically does everything in steps. So we have the application running on which the GUI will run, and then we call w equal pretty widget, so it calls a widget, and then is for exiting out. And finally we have the name equal to main for the environment. So let us run this code. Voila, it does the exact same thing, only we made it upgraded GUI to be a bit more fancier. Now congratulations, you know how to make a widget. Yay! Well, that's not as fun because you don't make an empty widget, you want buttons, tabs, and other cool stuff. So moving on to the next phase of our evil plan. If you ever watched Ren and Stimpy, this is kind of funny. Anyways, moving on. So next what we'll do is we'll try to make a button. So we have everything of our pretty widget class, and we have the user interface, we have the title, upgrade GUI, we set the geometry, the size, and the I believe this is the size and this is the position. Let me look it up one more time. 600, 300. Oh, sorry. The first two are basically where you're moving the coordinates of your GUI, and this is where what the size of the GUI is. Anyways, moving on, and this is our button. So in your user interface, after you make the widget, you're adding a button, and you're basically saying the name of the button, and from the Qt GUI Q push button. So it's called button, and it's being put in our self, which is our pretty widget. We resize our button, and we use button.sizeHint. It's a built-in Python. It's a built-in PyQt4 function which adjusts the size of your button based on what it should be, based on the size of the GUI, based on the size of the widget and your screen, and then it moves your button, and then you do self.show. And main and environment, you have everything else. Running the code, voila, you now have an upgraded GUI with a button. Right now the button doesn't do anything. To learn more about how to make a button work, I'll cover it on the next tutorial when we actually talk about signals and events. Till then, have fun and hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe on this page. Thank you.